Welcome to Get Unstuck with Michele, the podcast where we embark on a transformative journey through the realms of the mind, spirit, and soul. I'm Michele, your shamanic coach, here to guide you through the untamed wilderness of self-discovery and personal growth. Together, we'll unravel the threads that bind us to the past, release the weight that anchors us in the present, and unfurl the wings of potential that carry us toward a vibrant, purposeful future. Join me as we explore ancient wisdom, mystical practices, and powerful insights to awaken the spirit within and break free from stagnation. Let's take that courageous step together and get unstuck.
Let's talk about anxiety, what it is, how it affects us, and practical strategies to manage everyday anxiety. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I am not a therapist. I can't diagnose anyone, so don't take what I'm saying here as a diagnosis. This is just my understanding as someone who deals with anxiety. I'm coming from my experiences and what tools I use to help manage my own anxiety. If you feel like I'm describing you, please do some research and find a therapist, a professional, someone you can talk to if you want an official diagnosis. I cannot do that, and I cannot tell you that you have anxiety. So keep that in mind as you're listening to this. And if you're like, well, that sounds like me, fine. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but you need to talk to a professional, and that's not me as far as diagnosing anxiety or anything else goes. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. Now let's start by understanding what anxiety is. Anxiety is a common human experience, and most people at some point in their life experience anxiety. It's a natural response to stress or perceived threats. Now, anxiety is that fluttering feeling in your stomach before a big presentation or the nervousness before a first date. But that's normal, everyday stress, anxiety, things that we all experience from time to time that lead to anxiety. But when you live with anxiety, it's a different issue. It's not a response to a one-off thing. When you live with anxiety, when it can become a concern, it becomes excessive or overwhelming, or it interferes with your ability to function. When it becomes less about being nervous about something, but a persistent worry. So, anxiety can come with physical symptoms such as a racing heart, muscle tension, constant sense of dread. Those are all common physical symptoms. And those can be the physical symptoms of everyday nervousness that comes from a big thing like a job interview or something, but then it goes away after the interview happens. But those can also be physical symptoms that you live with on a daily basis if you have an anxiety disorder, if you're living with anxiety as part of your daily existence. So it's two different things. Well, it's the same thing, but it comes in different forms, whether it's a reaction to an event or a stressor, or if those stressors are constant and you're constantly living with the anxiety. Now, there are different types of anxiety disorders. I did mention anxiety disorder, and there are different types of anxiety disorders. And I'm going to go through a few of them here very briefly, but these are just a few anxiety disorders, and there are more. And of course, I'm not going to go into any depth on any of these. I'm just giving a brief gloss over of what some anxiety disorders are. There's generalized anxiety disorder, and that's characterized by chronic excessive worry. Panic disorder involves sudden and intense panic attacks. Social anxiety disorder is when an individual fears judgment and humiliation in social situations. Then you have specific phobias like a fear of flying or a fear of heights. The key here in these anxiety disorders is that the anxious feeling goes beyond what most people would consider a normal level of anxiety. It doesn't come as a reaction to an immediate issue and then dissipates. It stays with you. That's where it becomes or could become an anxiety disorder. Again, I am not a therapist. I cannot diagnose you. I'm not saying you have an anxiety disorder. Please, if that's something you think you may have, see a therapist, see a doctor, see somebody who can actually diagnose you and help you, because that's not me. And again, those are just a few different anxiety disorders. There are a lot more than that, and they're more nuanced and more in depth than the little brief thing I just said with each one of those. But that's what I wanted to say about what anxiety is and kind of getting a baseline understanding of anxiety. So whether you have an actual anxiety disorder or not, there are things you can do to help dissipate anxious thoughts and feelings, because we all experience anxious thoughts and feelings, whether we have an anxiety disorder or not. So I want to go over some things that help me when I'm dealing with my anxiety. These may not work for you because everybody is an individual, so keep that in mind. These are just things that work for me. Deep breathing exercises can work wonders. When I am feeling anxious, the first thing I do is find a way to stop and breathe. Now, everybody breathes every moment of the day, because if we stopped breathing, we would be dead. But there's a difference between breathing to sustain life and deep breathing, which helps to calm our fears, worries, and anxieties. So I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here on techniques for deep breathing. I'm just going to mention deep breathing, and you can go and Google that, talk to your friendly neighborhood librarian, whatever you want to do to find out about deep breathing. If that's something you want to explore, there are ways to find that out. That's not what this episode is about. I may do an episode about that in the future. I don't know. But that's not what this one is about. But deep breathing is the first thing that helps me. It helps to reduce physical sensations of anxiety, and it helps to calm my nervous system. Then there's mindfulness and meditation. Now, obviously, I have to mention that my whole business is named Living Moon Meditation, so I can't gloss over the fact that meditation is extremely helpful for me in dealing with anxiety. Mindfulness and meditation are powerful tools to stay present and to minimize anxious thoughts. The constant monkey mind coming back on those anxious thoughts. We all have anxious thoughts. We can never fully get rid of anxious thoughts in our lives. But the anxiety comes in when we constantly keep thinking about those worries and constantly keep dwelling on the what if, the what happens if this happens, the what will I do in this situation kind of thing. But mindfulness and meditation can help stop that constant cycle of worry. Now, there are apps like Calm and Headspace that you can use for guided sessions to get you started. Those are not any kind of, that's not a plug for those. I don't use them. I don't get any kind of pay for recommending those. I don't even use those myself. I use Insight Timer, but again, that's not something that I'm getting a kickback to say whatever. There's also tons of guided meditations on YouTube, and I have on my YouTube channel quite a bit of guided meditation. So if you're interested in finding mine, I have a link for you in the show notes that will take you to my YouTube channel. Another thing that works for me is to work on developing a healthy lifestyle. And I say work on developing a healthy lifestyle because I'm not perfect and there are things that I do that are not healthy, but I try to work towards a more healthy lifestyle. Regular exercise releases endorphins, and endorphins are natural mood enhancers. Trying to get a balanced diet, prioritizing sleep, limiting caffeine, limiting alcohol, These are all things that can help to maintain a healthy lifestyle and will help in managing anxiety levels. If it gets to the point where these are not working or you don't have techniques and tools that are working for you, you may want to see a therapist or a counselor or a doctor. Professionals like these can provide personalized strategies to help you in your individual path with dealing with anxiety. These professionals might suggest things like progressive muscle relaxation. I'm tripping over my words here. They might have you focus on things like time management. They may even recommend medication in different cases. And there's nothing wrong with taking medication if you need it for anxiety. So, all that to talk about anxiety. Just to remember that it's a part of life. And if you're feeling anxious, one, it's normal. It's natural. It doesn't mean you necessarily have an anxiety disorder. If you do have an anxiety disorder, that's okay too. It's not saying there's anything wrong with you. There are effective ways to cope and thrive no matter what form of anxiety you have. If it's a fleeting thing or if it's a chronic thing, there are ways to cope, to thrive, to manage those anxious feelings. Don't let anxiety hold you back. Take charge of your anxiety. You can take charge of your life. Take care of your health.
Love this podcast? How about giving me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app? If you want more content from me, subscribe to my newsletter over at livingmoonmeditation.com. And if you'd like to help me keep the lights on, I appreciate your donations. I have the links for that in the show notes.